arrived at Mom's house expecting grief, maybe some shared memories, perhaps closure. Instead, I got humiliation served cold in her mahogany-lined living room. The attorney, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, cleared his throat and announced that Elise Hartwell left everything to my sister Lydia. Everything. The estate, the farmland, the house where we grew up, even Grandma's china collection I'd carefully wrapped and stored after her funeral. Lydia didn't even try to hide her smirk. She sat perched on the leather sofa, perfectly manicured hands folded in her lap, looking like she'd just won the lottery. Relatives murmured behind me. Aunt Patricia gasped. Uncle Trevor shifted uncomfortably. I noticed Mason standing behind Lydia's chair, not beside her where a supportive boyfriend should be. His hands hung at his sides, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. My throat burned, but I refused to cry. I was gathering my bag to leave when something caught my attention at the bottom of the document. The attorney was shuffling away. One single line in smaller print. Contingent stewardship clause. I looked up. What's that? Mom's face instantly tightened. The room went silent. The attorney fumbled with the papers. His fingers suddenly clumsy. Oh, that's just standard legal language, nothing to concern. I'd like to hear it, I interrupted, my voice steadier than I felt. Mom leaned forward in her chair, her pearl necklace catching the afternoon light. There's no need to drag this out, Harper. The will is clear. Then reading one clause won't hurt. I stayed planted in my spot near the doorway. The attorney glanced at Mom, who gave a sharp shake of her head. We really should move on, he said, already flipping pages. I'm not moving until someone explains what that clause means. I crossed my arms. Lydia rolled her eyes. Always so dramatic, Harper. Can't you just accept that Mom trusted me more? If it's nothing, then read it, I shot back. The tension in the room felt thick enough to cut. Mom's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping beneath her powdered cheek. I pulled out my phone and quickly snapped a photo of the page before Mom could lunge forward and snatch the document away from the attorney's hands. Outside on the gravel driveway, Lydia made sure everyone could hear her. Well, I guess Mom finally made it clear who the responsible daughter is. She jangled the estate keys like a prize. Don't feel bad, Harper. Not everyone's cut out for real responsibility. Relatives filtered past me toward their cars, offering sympathetic pats on my shoulder that felt more like pity. I stood frozen, still processing what just happened inside. Mason finally emerged from the house, hands shoved deep in his jacket pockets. He walked past me without a word, positioning himself 2 steps behind Lydia like some kind of bodyguard. Mason, called out, hurt flooding through me. He glanced back but said nothing, his face unreadable. Lydia laughed, that high-pitched sound that always made my teeth hurt. Oh, Harper. Did you really think he'd pick you over the woman who's about to own a $3 million estate? I was about to respond when Lydia added something that made me freeze. Besides, Mom and I talked about this months ago. She knew exactly what she was doing. Months ago. Mom had been sick for 8 months, and Lydia claimed they'd discussed the will during that time. I'd been there almost daily, and I'd never seen Lydia visit once. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, unable to start the engine. My hands shook as I pulled up the photo on my phone, zooming in on the small print. The clause mentioned operational duties, community compliance, and prior caretaker guarantees. Legal jargon that meant nothing to me. I read it 3 times, my eyes straining against the glare on my phone screen. Then I saw the final line, almost hidden at the bottom. Non-compliance with stated terms automatically reverts estate stewardship to the secondary beneficiary. I stopped breathing. There was a secondary beneficiary. Someone else was named in this will. Someone Mom had designated as a backup plan. I read the sentence 5 more times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. But there it was, printed in official legal type. If Lydia failed to meet certain conditions, the estate would go to someone else. The question burning in my mind was simple. Who was the secondary beneficiary? And why had nobody mentioned this during the reading? I started the engine and pulled out my phone again, searching for the attorney's office number. The attorney's office smelled like old books and furniture polish. He sat across from me 2 days later, looking far less confident than he had in Mom's living room. I'd insisted on a private meeting, and he'd reluctantly agreed. "The contingent stewardship clause," I said, sliding a printed copy of my photo across his desk. "Explain it." He sighed, removing his glasses to clean them unnecessarily. "Your mother added this clause years ago when she took out a loan against the property. The lender required certain protections. And the secondary beneficiary." His pause told me everything. "That information is part of the sealed documentation." "Who is it?" He shifted papers around his desk. "Mrs. Hartwell added that provision, but I believe she intended to remove it later. She may have simply forgotten." "May have." I leaned forward. "Either she did or she didn't." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "The secondary beneficiary was never formally removed from the documentation, no." My heart pounded. "Then tell me the name." He shook his head slowly. "I can't disclose that without written permission from Mrs. Hartwell or a court order." I stood up, chair scraping against the wooden floor. Mom's apartment was smaller now that she'd moved out of the main house. She answered the door in her silk robe, surprise flickering across her face before it hardened into irritation. "Harper, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk about the clause." I didn't wait for an invitation, stepping inside past her. She closed the door with a soft click. "There's nothing to discuss. The will is final." "Then explain the contingent stewardship clause." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She moved to her sitting area, lowering herself onto the cream-colored sofa with practiced grace. "You were never strong enough for responsibility, Harper. Lydia earned this. She knows how to handle money, how to make difficult decisions." "That's not what I asked." "Lydia has always been more reliable, more present." "More present?" I laughed bitterly. "I was at the house every day during your treatment. Where was Lydia?" Mom's eyes flashed. "Lydia has a demanding career. She couldn't just drop everything like you did." The insult landed, but I stayed focused. "The clause mentions a secondary beneficiary. Who is it?" Something shifted in Mom's expression, just for a second. Fear maybe. Or regret. "You were never supposed to see that clause," she said quietly. The county records office was a gray building that smelled like dust and old paper. I'd spent 3 hours filling out request forms, waiting in lines, and finally convincing a clerk that I had legitimate reasons for accessing old land records. The archivist, a woman named Delia with silver hair and kind eyes, led me to a back room where boxes of property documents were stored. "The Hartwell estate has quite a history," she said, pulling down a heavy box. "Your grandmother was very particular about how the land was managed." I sat at the research table, carefully opening aged folders. The property had been purchased 42 years ago using my grandmother's inheritance from her parents. That much I knew. What I didn't know was that the purchase came with conditions. Specific requirements about land use, community involvement, and heritage preservation. Delia watched me read, a small smile playing at her lips. "Your grandmother was a smart woman," she said. "She protected what mattered to her." I looked up from the documents. "What do you mean?" She pulled out another folder, this one containing a deed rider I'd never seen. "Are you the granddaughter named on the deed rider?" My hands trembled as I read the deed rider. It was dated 3 years after Grandma purchased the property, written in formal legal language that still managed to convey her strong personality. The document named me specifically. Harper Eloise Hartwell, designated future steward of the land if certain heritage requirements are not met by primary inheritor. The requirements were clear. Maintain community garden access, preserve historical structures, participate in annual heritage festival planning, and keep at least 60% of the acreage undeveloped. Lydia had never attended a single heritage festival meeting. I'd been going since I was 16, helping organize events, coordinating volunteers, maintaining the old barn where activities were held. This is legally binding? I asked Delia, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. Your grandmother had it notarized and filed with the county. It became part of the permanent property record. I flipped to the last page and felt my breath catch. Mom's signature was at the bottom, dated 23 years ago, acknowledging the terms. Delia handed me a photocopy. You might want to keep this. I took it with shaking hands, already thinking about what this meant. The family gathering at Aunt Patricia's house was supposed to be a casual dinner, but tension hung in the air like smoke. Lydia arrived late, making an entrance in a designer dress I knew cost more than my monthly rent. I stayed quiet in the corner, nursing a glass of wine and watching. Mason sat beside Lydia but kept checking his phone, his leg bouncing under the table. Lydia dominated the conversation, talking about her plans for the estate. I'm thinking of modernizing, she announced, waving her fork. The property's too large for one person. I've already had developers look at the south acreage. My fingers tightened around my wine glass. Aunt Patricia frowned. Your grandmother loved that land. She used to take you girls on walks through those fields. Times change. Lydia shrugged. I'm selling off half the acreage to a development company. They're offering an incredible amount. The room went quiet. Uncle Trevor cleared his throat uncomfortably. I set down my glass carefully, my mind racing. Selling breaks the heritage clause instantly. Grandma's deed rider specifically prohibited selling more than 40% of the land. Lydia was violating the terms without even knowing it. I waited until after dinner to corner Mason in the driveway. He was leaning against Lydia's car, smoking a cigarette even though he'd quit 2 years ago. Why are you doing this? Asked, keeping my voice low. He looked up, guilt flashing across his face before he hit it. Doing what? Standing behind her. Supporting her. We dated for 3 years, Mason. You know what kind of person Lydia is. He took a long drag, exhaling slowly. I didn't know things would happen like this, Harper. I didn't know your mom would. Would what? Cut me out completely. I stepped closer. You could have warned me. You could have said something. I couldn't. His voice cracked slightly. That's when I noticed it, gleaming on the dashboard inside the car. Lydia's diamond bracelet, the one Mom gave her last Christmas. The one worth $15,000. You're with her now, I said flatly. Mason's face went pale. Harper, it's not. Don't. I held up my hand. Just tell me one thing. Why? He dropped the cigarette, crushing it under his shoe. Please don't start something. Please just leave it alone. His fear was obvious now. He wasn't just scared of losing Lydia. He was scared of something else entirely. I spent the next 3 days diving into every financial document I could access through public records. Property tax statements, loan applications, liens, anything tied to the estate. What I found made my stomach turn. Mom had taken out multiple loans against the property over the past 5 years. Significant loans that required proof of stable stewardship and long-term management plans. The most recent loan, dated 18 months ago, required documentation that the estate's designated steward was capable of maintaining property values and meeting community obligations. Lydia's name wasn't on any of these documents. Mine was. I stared at the papers spread across my kitchen table. One particular notice, dated 3 years ago, was addressed directly to me at my old apartment. I'd never received it. Mom must have intercepted it. The notice stated that as secondary beneficiary and designated steward under the original deed rider, I needed to acknowledge my role in the property's long-term planning. Mom had hidden this from me. For years. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello. Miss Hartwell, this is County Clerk's office. We have additional documents you requested. Jonas had worked on the Hartwell farm for 37 years. He was there when Grandma bought the land, there when I learned to ride my first horse, there through every season and every family drama. I found him in the old barn, repairing fence posts. His weathered face broke into a smile when he saw me. Harper girl. Been wondering when you'd come around. Jonas, I need to know something. I helped him lift a post into place. Did Mom ever talk to you about the will? His smile faded. He glanced around, making sure we were alone. Your mama always said you'd inherit. Said you were the only one who cared about this land the way your grandma did. But she left everything to Lydia. Jonas hammered a nail, the sound echoing in the empty barn. Something changed last year. I noticed it. Your mama got different. Colder, especially toward you. What happened? He set down his hammer, wiping sweat from his forehead. About 13 months back I was fixing the porch steps. Heard your mama and Lydia arguing inside. Lydia was saying something about forcing you out, making sure you had no claim. My chest tightened. What else did you hear? Jonas met my eyes, his expression grave. Your mama said she'll fight it. And Lydia said, not if she doesn't know what to fight for. Mason showed up at my apartment at 11 at night, looking like he hadn't slept in days. I almost didn't let him in, but something in his face made me open the door. He collapsed onto my couch, head in his hands. I need to tell you something. I stayed standing, arms crossed. I'm listening. Lydia told me you were emotionally unstable. Said your mom was worried about you, that you'd been acting erratic since your dad died. She said your mom needed someone rational around, someone who could help make hard decisions. And you believed her. He looked up, eyes red. Your mom backed her up, Harper. She called me herself, said she was concerned about your mental state. She asked me to keep some distance from you for a while. Felt cold. So you just cut me off. I thought I was helping. I thought. He stopped, swallowing hard. Your mom promised me something if I supported Lydia. Promised you what? Mason's voice dropped to barely a whisper. A management position for the estate. 20% stake in future development profits. She said Lydia would need someone she could trust, someone from outside the family to keep things objective. I laughed, the sound bitter in the quiet apartment. She bought you. I didn't know she was going to cut you out completely, he said desperately. I swear I didn't know. The letter arrived on expensive cream-colored paper with Mom's attorney's letterhead. I opened it standing at my mailbox, still in my work clothes. The message was clear. Cease all inquiries into the estate immediately. Any further attempts to contest the will or access property records would be met with legal action for harassment and interference with estate administration. It was designed to scare me, to make me back down. I was about to crumple it up when I noticed something. 2 pages were stuck together. I carefully peeled them apart and found a second document, clearly not meant to be included. It was a draft letter from Mom to her attorney, dated 2 weeks before she died. It mentioned the contingent stewardship clause and included a handwritten note in the margin. Must discuss removal options. Harper cannot discover secondary designation. My hands shook as I read it again. Mom knew I was the secondary beneficiary. She knew about the deed rider, knew about Grandma's conditions, and she'd been actively trying to remove me from the documentation before she died. I took photos of both documents and immediately called the county clerk's office. The development contract was public record once filed with the Planning Commission. I requested it the same day I received Mom's threatening letter. Lydia had already signed preliminary agreements with Bridgewater Development Corporation. The contract detailed plans to clear 48 acres on the south portion of the property, including a protected grove of oak trees that were over 200 years old. Those trees were specifically mentioned in Grandma's deed rider. They were designated heritage trees, protected under county preservation codes that Grandma had fought to establish. Cutting them down violated multiple terms of the stewardship requirements. I spread the documents across my kitchen table next to everything else I'd collected. The deed rider, the loan documents, the heritage requirements, and now this contract. A town official named Wesley had been kind enough to highlight the problem areas. He'd called me after reviewing the application. "Miss Hartwell, I don't know if you're aware, but this contract could void your sister's entire claim to the property. The violations are significant." I thanked him and immediately scheduled an appointment with a property attorney. Finally, I had what I needed. The archival court hearing was small and procedural. I'd filed a motion to unseal the complete estate documentation, including all beneficiary designations and deed riders attached to the original property purchase. Mom's attorney objected, of course, claiming privacy concerns and irrelevant historical documents. But my attorney argued that understanding the full chain of title was essential for proper estate administration. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun, reviewed the arguments and granted my request. 3 days later, I sat in the clerk's office as Delia brought out sealed files that hadn't been opened in decades. The secondary beneficiary named in the contingent stewardship clause was me, Harper Eloise Hartwell, designated 23 years ago when Mom signed Grandma's deed rider. Mom had never removed my name. The documentation was complete and legally binding. But there was more. According to recent filing records, Mom had attempted to change the designation 5 weeks before she died. She'd submitted paperwork to remove me and name Lydia as both primary and secondary beneficiary. The paperwork was rejected. She'd used outdated forms and failed to include required notarization from all original parties, including Grandma, who was already deceased. "She tried to erase you," Delia said softly. "But she couldn't. I found out about Mason's involvement by accident. I was reviewing filing records at the county office when I recognized his signature on a property transfer request form. He'd helped Lydia prepare paperwork to remove me from the deed, claiming I'd verbally relinquished all interest in the estate. The form was notarized and filed 2 weeks after Mom's death. It was fraudulent. I'd never relinquished anything. But more importantly, it was filed using outdated legal forms from 7 years ago. The county had updated all property transfer procedures, and these old forms were no longer valid. I drove straight to Mason's apartment, my anger cold and controlled. He answered the door in sweatpants, surprise and guilt washing over his face when he saw me. "Harper, you helped her commit fraud." I held up copies of the forms. His face crumbled. "She told me it was standard procedure. She said you'd already agreed to everything, that you just didn't want to deal with the paperwork. And you believed her." He sank onto his couch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "She promised to take care of me financially. Real money, Harper. Enough to finally start my business, to stop living paycheck to paycheck." Tears started rolling down his face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I felt nothing looking at him. Just cold, empty disappointment. Mom looked older when I arrived at her apartment unannounced. She was thinner, her skin papery, but her eyes were still sharp when she opened the door. "Harper." No surprise this time, just resignation. She stepped aside to let me in. We sat in her formal living room, the same room where she'd served tea to important guests, where she'd hosted charity meetings and impressed donors with her grace. "Why?" asked simply. She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. Lydia knew how to flatter me. She knew what I needed to hear. "You were always so independent, so determined to do things your own way. That's not a reason to cut me out of everything. You reminded me too much of him." Her voice cracked. "Your father. The way you look, the way you talk, the way you challenge everything. After he died I couldn't." She stopped, wiping her eyes. Lydia was easier. She agreed with me, supported my decisions, made me feel valued. "So you rewarded her for manipulation." Mom's laugh was bitter. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I simply chose the daughter who made me feel like a good mother instead of the one who constantly reminded me of my failures." I stood up. "Did you really think I was too independent to stay loyal?" She met my eyes. "I thought you were too strong to need me." Lydia needed me. Or at least, she made me believe she did. The town meeting exploded the moment Lydia presented the development plans. She stood at the podium in her designer suit, smiling confidently as she explained the economic benefits of selling half the estate for residential development. Then Wesley, the town official who'd called me, stood up. "Miss Hartwell, are you aware that the property you're proposing to sell is under heritage protection?" Lydia's smile faltered. "That's outdated regulation. My attorney assures me." "Your attorney is wrong." Wesley held up documentation. "The Hartwell estate is bound by a deed rider established by the original purchaser. Your grandmother specifically prohibited the sale or development of more than 40% of the acreage." Murmurs spread through the crowd. Lydia's face went red. "That's not legally binding anymore. My mother inherited the property, and she left it to me with full rights." "Actually," I stood up from the back row, "the deed rider transfers with the property regardless of inheritance. It's part of the permanent record." Every head in the room turned toward me. Lydia's expression shifted from confident to panicked in seconds. An older man I recognized from Heritage Committee meetings stood up. "If you violate those terms, you forfeit your claim entirely." Lydia looked around wildly, searching for support. "This is ridiculous. Mom never mentioned." "Your mother tried to hide it," I said calmly. "But the law doesn't care what she mentioned or didn't mention." Lydia pointed at Mom, who sat frozen in the front row. "This is her fault. She told me I had full control." I filed the motion on a Wednesday morning. My attorney had prepared everything meticulously. Copies of the deed rider, documentation of Lydia's violations, evidence of the mismanaged loans, proof of Mom's attempted fraud, and the development contract that broke multiple heritage requirements. The case for activating the contingent stewardship clause was airtight. We requested emergency review based on imminent violation of protected land rights. The development company was scheduled to begin clearing the oak grove in 2 weeks. My attorney smiled when she submitted the filing. "This is one of the cleanest cases I've seen. Your grandmother was incredibly thorough." 3 days later, I received notification that the court had scheduled an emergency hearing. Mom's attorney had been copied on all documents, and according to the clerk, he'd called the office 4 times trying to get the hearing delayed. All requests were denied. I sat in my apartment that night, staring at the notice. This was real. This was happening. My phone rang. Lydia's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times. I finally turned off my phone and went to bed, sleeping better than I had in months. Lydia showed up at my apartment at 7 in the morning, pounding on the door hard enough to wake my neighbors. I opened it to find her still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smudged, hair disheveled. "Please." She pushed past me into the apartment. "Please withdraw the case. We can work something out." I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. "There's nothing to work out. Harper, Mom manipulated both of us." Tears streamed down her face. "She told me you didn't want the estate, that you were too busy with your career to deal with property management. She said I'd be doing you a favor by taking it. You expect me to believe that?" "It's true." Lydia collapsed onto my couch. "She played us against each other. She knew exactly what she was doing." I stayed by the door, unmoved. "You still signed development contracts without researching the restrictions. You still helped Mason forge documents. You still spent months gloating about inheriting everything." Lydia wiped her eyes, smearing mascara further. "I made mistakes. I know I did. But if you go through with this, I lose everything. The estate, the money Mom left, everything. You would have taken everything from me without a second thought." She looked up at me, desperate. "Mom promised Mason the cabin. Did you know that? She was dividing the estate behind our backs. She promised him property too, told him he'd have a place to build his business. She lied to all of us." That information stopped me cold. "What?" "The cabin on the north corner. She had separate paperwork drawn up leaving it to Mason as payment for helping manage Lydia's transition into estate ownership." Lydia's laugh was hysterical. She was playing everyone. Mom showed up at my workplace the next afternoon, causing a scene in the lobby that had security almost calling the police. She was screaming about betrayal, about destroying the family, about dishonoring her memory. "You're tearing this family apart," she shouted as my coworkers watched from doorways and cubicles. Everything I did was to protect this family's legacy. I stood calm at the reception desk, waiting for her to finish. "Are you done? How can you do this? I'm your mother. You cut me out of the will while pretending to care about me. You intercepted legal documents meant for me. You tried to erase me from Grandma's deed rider. You manipulated Mason, lied to Lydia, and tried to hide the truth from everyone." My voice stayed level. "You destroyed this family yourself." Mom's face twisted. "I gave you everything growing up. I sacrificed. You gave me things. You never gave me respect." She raised her hand as if to slap me, but security stepped forward. Mom lowered her arm, breathing hard, mascara running down her face. My phone rang. I glanced at the screen, my attorney's name. Answered, still looking at Mom. "Hello. Harper, the judge just issued a preliminary ruling." My attorney's voice was excited. "It's in your favor. Complete transfer pending the final hearing." I smiled at Mom. "Thank you. I'll call you back." Mom's face went white. She knew what that call meant. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, harsh fluorescent lights. A judge's bench that looked like it had been there since the building was constructed. Lydia sat with her attorney at one table. Mom sat behind her, looking frail and defeated. Mason wasn't there. I sat with my attorney, documents organized in neat folders before us. The hearing took 2 hours. My attorney presented the deed rider, the heritage requirements, and documentation of every violation Lydia had committed. The development contract, the protected trees, the loan mismanagement, the forged property transfer forms. Lydia's attorney tried to argue that the deed rider was outdated, that modern property rights superseded historical documents. The judge shut him down immediately. The deed rider was legally filed and notarized. It's part of the permanent property record. Your client's ignorance of its existence doesn't invalidate it. Then my attorney presented evidence that Mom had actively hidden these documents from both daughters, but especially from me as the named secondary beneficiary. The judge reviewed everything silently, her expression unreadable. Finally she looked up. "Based on the evidence presented, Miss Lydia Hartwell has violated multiple requirements established in the property's deed rider. She has proven herself unfit to serve as steward of this estate." Lydia made a small sound like air being let out of a balloon. "Therefore, I'm ordering immediate transfer of control to the secondary beneficiary, Harper Eloise Hartwell, as designated in the original documentation." The gavel came down. It was over. The keys were heavy in my hand. Actual metal keys to the main house, the barn, the cabin, everything. The attorney who'd read Mom's will handed them to me in the estate office, barely meeting my eyes. The deed transfer papers were signed, notarized, and filed. The property, all of it, was legally mine. Lydia sat in the corner chair, staring at nothing. Mom stood by the window, her back to the room, shoulders shaking with silent tears. I picked up my copies of the documentation and the keys. "I'm heading to the house now." Lydia didn't look up. Mom didn't turn around. I walked out of the office into bright afternoon sunshine. My car was parked in the same spot where I'd parked months ago for the will reading, when I'd thought I was attending a funeral service and instead attended my own character execution. I drove to the estate slowly, windows down, letting the familiar roads calm me. The oak trees were still there, protected now. The fields stretched golden in the late summer sun. The old barn stood steady, waiting. I parked in front of the main house and sat for a moment, keys in my hand. Then I noticed something through the window. Someone had left a letter on Grandma's old writing desk in the front room. The envelope was yellowed with age, the handwriting unmistakably Grandma's. It was addressed to me in her flowing script. "For Harper when the time comes." I sat in Grandma's favorite chair by the window and carefully opened the seal. The letter inside was dated 24 years ago, Written shortly after Mom signed the deed rider. My dearest Harper, it began. If you're reading this, then everything happened exactly as I feared it might. Your mother has always been a woman who values appearance over substance, charm over character. I love her, but I see her clearly. I created the contingent stewardship clause to protect you, not from malice, but from your mother's weakness. She will choose the child who flatters her, not the child who truly loves this land. That child, sweet girl, is you. I've watched you walk these fields, care for the animals, appreciate the history in every old fence post and weathered barn board. You understand what this land means. You understand legacy. The clause isn't about money or property. It's about ensuring that someone who truly cares will protect what matters. I trust you to honor that. The letter continued with specific instructions about land management, heritage preservation, and community relationships. It ended with, "Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for claiming what was always meant to be yours. You didn't take anything. You simply honored the legacy meant for you. With all my love, Grandma." I sat there as the sun set, the letter in my lap, tears streaming down my face. Not from sadness, but from finally feeling seen. My phone buzzed. Mom's number. A text message. "Can we talk? Maybe work something out." Then Lydia. "Please. We're still family." I looked out at the fields glowing in the sunset, at the oak trees standing strong, at the barn where Jonas was probably still working. I texted back a simple response. No. Then I turned off my phone, walked onto the front porch of my house, my home, and breathed in the evening air. For the first time in my entire life, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Free. Respected. Finally in control of my own life. The estate was mine. Not because I'd fought for it out of greed or spite, but because someone who truly loved me had made sure I'd always have a place to belong. I sat on the porch steps and watched the stars come out, knowing Grandma was somewhere smiling.